He was starving for oxygen.
It just makes it stronger, beefier, better.
What do you put? Just regular jersey gloves? Just.
Now, when I first pulled up to the school, I was a little caught off guard. The building looked like just a casual diner that you would find in any southern town. And if you didn't see the army of big, giant Lang smokers in the back, you probably wouldn't know that this was the Lang Barbecue School. Now, since the parking lot was filled up with giant Langs on trailers and patio models, 36s and 48s, I went to the other side of the building and just parked in the grass, put on my Lang hat, picked up my notebook, and I headed inside. I decided I was going to totally lean into this experience and not try and play it cool. Now, there were 3 other students at the countertop, and they were all chatting with the instructors. Each of them greeted me, and as I walked in, you could tell I was going to have a good vibe. Now, the class only had 4 students, and so each of us was going to get a lot of attention. And I found out that each of us had traveled to get there. Now, this one guy was a Lang smoker from New York down to Florida. And he was so impressed by the smoker that he called Ben Lang up, ordered a 60-foot trailer, and signed up for the class. In fact, he was going to be cooking on that smoker in the class as we were doing it. You know, that's pretty dang cool. Now, our instructor was really cool. There were 2 of them. One of them was focused on competitions. The other one was focused on catering. And so the one on competitions, his name was Daryl Strickland, and he's a pretty well-known barbecue competitor, especially in the Georgia area. In fact, he said he'd beat Myron Nixon a couple times. So to me, that was all the credibility that he needed. In fact, I think he told me he'd been the Georgia Barbecue Team of the Year at one point. Now, the thing that really struck me was that each of us was going to get our own prep area. This was going to be hands-on. I'd gone to some other classes where you kind of sit in the back. Tuffy Stone's class. Drove 4 hours to get there. Tuffy cut, trimmed, and did everything up front with a camera overhead. But I never touched a knife. I never touched a protein. Never did any cooking. Never touched a smoker. This was going to be completely different. And I was really grateful for that because not only do I want to hear about barbecue, but I wanted to learn about barbecue. So like I said, this class was going to be hands-on. We were going to trim, inject, rub, and cook hot and fast. And we were going to have all this done for lunch. Now it's 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'm thinking it's going to be a light menu. But no, we're doing brisket, pork butt, chicken, ribs, and some sides. Again, cooking hot and fast. Now, no pressure, but Ben Lang and his family were going to be showing up for lunch. So yeah, it was kind of game on for me. So here's some things that really stood out to me as we were going through the different trimmings and prepping for the meats. The brisket. Now, the instructors really aggressively trimmed the point of the brisket, much more than I've ever done. And they exposed a huge amount of meat on that. Now, on the lean side, especially on the fat cap, hardly any trimming whatsoever. They rounded the edges. They got rid of some of the decal fat and removed like the brown seam that you get on the side of a brisket from the packing plant. But that was about it. Now, the reason they said that you don't want to mess with the fat cap was because we were going to use that fat cap to help protect the brisket. Because again, we're cooking hot and fast. After the trim, we did an injection on the brisket. And this is something that I don't normally do. But they said it really helps because you're cooking hot and fast. They kept emphasizing you're cooking hot and fast. You're not doing low and slow. You're not doing 225 degrees. This is not the way that the Lang works. Now, they said you can cook that way, but you're just going to be fighting it a lot. So this was a good thing for me to hear because honestly, when I cook with the Lang at 225, I'm constantly babysitting it because I have to have a really small fire. Giving myself permission to go up to 325 degrees is going to be just basically a game changer because I'm not going to have to babysit the smoker so much. Now, the beef injection was Heath Ryle's beef injection. We used a half a cup of his injection with 16 ounces. of beef broth. Now, the standard 16-ounce container of a Swanson's beef broth is basically the ratio that you needed. Now, these ratios were probably for a 10 to 12 pound brisket that, all of us would typically get at a grocery store. Now, for the rubs, we definitely went for like layers of flavor. The first rub was Sucklebuster's 1836, and I had used this rub before myself and really enjoy it. It's a medium heat, nice flavor. It's got, kind of pepper on the back, so you do feel the pepper on the back as you're, getting into that brisket. The second rub was a new one for me. It was called Texas Barbecue Number 2. And then the third layer was Killer Hogs Barbecue Rub. And this one was just basically for the color and just a little bit of heat. We cooked the brisket at 325 degrees. You're going to hear that temperature a lot, for an hour and a half to set the bark. After an hour and a half, we wrapped the brisket in a pan. This is another new thing for me. Placed it back on the smoker for another 4 hours. The whole time you're cooking this brisket at 325 degrees. Now, the thing that I noticed was all of the proteins were cooked in pans. And this is a new concept for me. I've never done that. I think part of the reason was one of the instructors was a competition cook, so the ability to move things back and forth. The other instructor owned a catering business and a small restaurant. Same concept. You want to keep things clean, the ability to move proteins back and forth. So will I cook in pans going forward? I'm not quite sure. I mean, for the average backyard guy, I didn't really see the value of the pans. But for those of you that do competition or considering catering, apparently it's pretty important. Next up was the pork butt. Now, the instructors spent a lot of time with the students, and you have to be prepared for that. Everybody's expertise level was at a different place. The guy that had picked up his smoker was basically learning barbecue brand new for the first time. And so he had a lot of fundamentals to learn. I just kind of listened, and it was just good to kind of validate what I already knew. So they spent a lot of time going through the various parts of the pork butt. They spoke about where the money muscle and how it was opposite of the pork bone blade on the other side. One interesting pro tip was for those that competed in competitions. Cook the pork butt to 187 degrees and then cut off the money muscle. They actually put like a cut alongside the money muscle. That way, as the protein cooked, the money muscle pulled away from it. So you ended up with this really round and distinct money muscle to make medallions out of. Now, the pork butt didn't get any other trim other than a light trim for just loose edges. We really didn't touch the fat cap at all. The rub that we used was another Sucklebuster's rub called Hog Waller. We put the pork butts on at 9:10 in the morning, and we had them wrapped by 11:20. The whole cooking process was very familiar, but the pace of the cook was very accelerated. It was just much more aggressive. And the temperatures and the timing, you could tell like we were cooking with an agenda. Now for the ribs, we did a standard trim on the ribs. They were Kansas City style. Pulled the membranes off the back. We used the same Killer Hogs barbecue rub on these ribs and cooked the ribs at a temperature of 325 for the first hour and a half. Now for the first hour and a half, we did not spritz at all during that time. After an hour and a half, it was time for the wrap. And for the wrap, we placed all 6 ribs and we stacked them and placed them in one pan. And then we poured in kind of the wrap liquid for it. And that was going to be Heath Ryle's butter bath, which was basically a half cup of butter bath to 2 cups of apple juice. But I was still in shock with the fact that we did all 6 ribs in one pan with foil. Now, those of you who have watched the channel, you know that I did this huge rib cook, and there's a portion in the video, and I'll link the video, where you can see all the different racks of ribs laying around my kitchen, 19 racks, each of them individually wrapped in foil. So each of them got the honey, the brown sugar, all of it. And so now I'm seeing these guys just do one pan, 6 ribs. I was like, okay, there's no way that's going to work. No way that's going to work. Let me tell you, it worked just fine. Great pro tip for me to learn. We did some chickens, we did some sides. Again, there was a lot going on. Now let's talk about lunch. So lunch came, sides were done, brisket's done, ribs are done, pork butt's done. In walks Ben Lang and his family. And I got to tell you, I was a little starstruck. Ben Lang was super chill, just, normal Southern guy, just talking to a bunch of people, going to eat some barbecue. We did a blessing on the food. And then I got to sit with Ben at lunch. And that alone was probably worth the whole trip for me. Well, the class ended just like it started. A bunch of guys sitting at the counter, talking about smokers, talking about barbecue. So was it worth 7.5-hour drive? Yes. Was it worth staying in a hotel? Yes. Was it going to be worth the 7.5-hour drive back? Absolutely. It was one of those once in a lifetime, at least, kind of experiences. And I'm glad I got to do it because I got to see, the factory, which is much smaller than you think it is. Truly, it's a small business on the side of the road. It's very impressive that Lang smokers are shipped and known worldwide because it really is a small business in a small Georgia town. Well, that's my experience with the Lang barbecue class. If you're curious about it yourself, you should go visit Lang's website. They have a whole section dedicated to the class, cost, timing, even instructions on what hotels to look at. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Tell some friends about it. If you know people that own Lang's, let them know. Now, for all my Shirley fans, I still love my Shirley. I don't want anybody to think that I don't. I just cook with what I got, and I just happen to have a few on my porch. Thanks for watching.